When I was 13, my mom said, "Figure it out yourself," then left me outside in the pouring rain while she drove off. I slept on the porch that night. I never spoke to her again until 15 years later when she messaged me. "Since you're rich now, we need a place to stay." I stared at the message and started typing. I, 28M, cut my mother out of my life 15 years ago. She just asked me for money. The rain that night wasn't the heaviest I'd seen, but at 13, standing there watching her taillights disappear around the corner, it felt like the world was ending. I'd forgotten my house key at school. Stupid mistake, I know, and called her from the neighbor's phone. She told me to figure it out myself. Those exact words. Then she hung up. I waited on the porch for 6 hours, soaked through to my skin, shivering so hard my teeth rattled. She came home around midnight, stepped over me without a word, and locked the door behind her. I slept there that night, curled up against the siding, and something inside me broke that I've never quite been able to put back together. The next morning, she acted like nothing happened. Made breakfast, asked if I wanted eggs. I stared at her and realized I was done. 13 years old, and I decided my mother no longer existed. Growing up after that was a study in survival. My father had left when I was 6, just walked out one day and never looked back, so it was just her and me in that house. Or rather, just me. She was there physically, sure, but that was about it. I learned to make myself invisible. Stayed at school as late as they'd let me, spent weekends at the library, picked up a part-time job at 15 bagging groceries. She didn't notice or didn't care. Both, probably. The guidance counselor, Mrs. Patterson, saw something was off. She started keeping protein bars in her desk drawer and would slip me one whenever I stopped by her office. Never asked questions directly, just made herself available. When college applications came around, she sat with me for hours helping me navigate financial aid, scholarship essays, recommendation letters. All the things a parent is supposed to do. I got into a state school with a full ride. The day I turned 18 and graduated high school, I packed everything I owned into 2 duffel bags and left. Didn't say goodbye, didn't leave a note. Just walked out the same way my father had, except I had a plan. College was brutal in the best way. I worked 30 hours a week while carrying a full course load, majored in computer science because the tech boom was just starting and I needed marketable skills. Slept 4 hours a night, lived on ramen and black coffee, and graduated in 3 years instead of 4 because every semester cost money I didn't want to borrow. My first job paid $45,000 a year. It felt like winning the lottery. I lived in a studio apartment with 3 other guys, saved 70% of my paycheck, and taught myself to code in 3 different languages during my commute. By 23, I'd moved to a better company for $70,000. By 25, I was at 6 figures. By 27, I'd co-founded a startup. The startup was the gamble. My partner and I mortgaged everything we had, which in my case wasn't much, and built a platform for small businesses to manage their inventory and sales data. Boring stuff, but necessary stuff. We worked 100-hour weeks for 18 months, living in the office, showering at the gym. I didn't date, didn't have hobbies, barely had friends. Just work. Then a major retail corporation bought us out for $8 million. My cut after investors and taxes was just over $2 million. I was 28 years old and financially secure for the first time in my life. Bought a modest house in a decent neighborhood, put a chunk in retirement accounts, invested the rest conservatively. Kept working because I didn't know what else to do with myself. Started a consulting business, took on clients I liked, turned down the ones I didn't. Life was quiet, controlled mine. And then the message came. I was reviewing quarterly reports on a Tuesday afternoon when my phone buzzed with a Facebook message request. The name meant nothing at first. She'd remarried at some point, apparently, but the profile picture made my stomach drop. Older, grayer, but definitely her. The message was short. "I know we haven't talked in a long time, but I need to ask you something important. Can we chat?" I stared at it for 10 minutes. My first instinct was to block her immediately, but curiosity got the better of me. What could she possibly want after 15 years of silence? Part of me, the part that was still that 13-year-old kid on the porch, needed to know. I typed back, "What do you want?" Her response came within minutes, like she'd been waiting by the phone. She explained that she and her husband had fallen on hard times. He'd lost his job, they'd burned through their savings, couldn't make rent. She'd heard through some distant cousin that I'd done well for myself. Since I was rich now, they needed a place to stay. Just temporarily, of course. until they got back on their feet. The audacity of it hit me like a physical thing. 15 years without a single word, no birthday calls, no Christmas cards, nothing. And now I was supposed to rescue her because she'd made poor financial decisions? I read the message 3 times, feeling that old familiar anger bubbling up. But underneath it was something else, something colder. I started typing. My response was measured. I told her I'd need to think about it and suggested we meet in person to discuss the situation. She agreed immediately, probably thinking she'd won already. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop downtown the following Saturday. I spent the week doing research. Found her address through public records, drove by the apartment complex one evening. It wasn't terrible, not great, but not destitute either. Looked up her husband on LinkedIn. He'd been employed up until 3 months ago, which matched her timeline. Credit reports showed they were behind on several payments, but not catastrophically so. This wasn't a desperate emergency. This was poor planning and an unwillingness to make hard choices. Saturday came. I got to the coffee shop early, ordered a black coffee, and sat at a corner table where I could watch the door. She arrived 10 minutes late, and I barely recognized her. The years hadn't been kind. She looked worn down, defeated, older than her 56 years. She slid into the chair across from me and smiled nervously. She started with pleasantries. How good I looked, how proud she must be, how she always knew I'd do well, and I cut her off. Asked her to explain the situation clearly and specifically. The story came out in pieces. Her husband had worked in manufacturing, got laid off when the plant closed. They'd lived above their means for years, had nothing saved, couldn't downsize because they were locked into a lease. They'd applied for assistance, but were waiting on approvals. Her own retail job barely covered groceries. They were 2 months behind on rent and facing eviction within 30 days. She finally got to the ask. Could they stay with me while they figured things out? She knew I had a house now. It would just be temporary. I let the silence stretch out between us. Took a sip of coffee. Watched her fidget with her napkin. Then I asked her if she remembered the night it rained. The color drained from her face. She started to say something, stopped, tried again. She claimed she didn't know what I was talking about, but the lie was transparent. I described it for her, every detail I could remember. The phone call, her words, the 6 hours in the rain, sleeping on the porch, waking up to her stepping over me. She stammered out some excuse about being stressed that day, about me being irresponsible with my key, about how she'd thought I'd figure something out. She was sorry if I'd taken it the wrong way. It was 15 years ago. Didn't I think it was time to move past it? I told her it wasn't just that night. That was just the night I stopped pretending things were okay. I ran through the years of neglect, the emotional absence, the way she'd treated me like an inconvenience rather than her child. She tried to interrupt several times, but I kept talking. 15 years of words I'd never said came pouring out, calm and measured and absolutely devastating. When I finished, she was crying. Said she'd done her best as a single mother, that I didn't understand how hard it was, that she'd been dealing with her own problems. I told her I understood perfectly, that I'd forgiven her years ago, in the sense that I'd stopped letting anger at her control my life. But forgiveness didn't mean reconciliation, and it certainly didn't mean I owed her anything. She asked what I wanted her to do. Where was she supposed to go? How was she supposed to survive? I suggested she figure it out herself. Those exact words. Let them hang in the air between us. Then I stood up, left a 20 on the table for my coffee, and walked out. She called after me, but I didn't turn around. Update 1. The aftermath was messier than I expected. She started calling repeatedly, first pleading, then angry, then desperate again. I blocked her number after the 5th voicemail. She found my work email somehow and sent a long message about how cruel I was being, how family was supposed to help family, how I'd become heartless. I didn't respond. Then the extended family got involved. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had my number. An aunt I barely remembered called to tell me I was being unreasonable, that blood was thicker than water, that I'd regret this someday. I asked her if she was offering to take them in. She said that wasn't the point. I hung up. The guilt came in waves those first few weeks. I'd lie awake at night second-guessing myself, wondering if I was being petty, if I was punishing her too harshly for mistakes she'd made when I was a kid. But then I'd remember that it wasn't just that one night. It was years of systematic neglect. It was a pattern of behavior that showed me exactly where I ranked in her priorities. My therapist, I'd started seeing one after the startup sold, at a friend's insistence, helped me work through it. She pointed out that healthy boundaries aren't cruel, that I wasn't responsible for fixing problems my mother had created, that family doesn't mean accepting mistreatment. Still, the calls kept coming from various relatives. I started screening everything. Work became my refuge again, the same way it had been when I was younger. I took on 2 new clients, worked 12-hour days, stayed busy enough that I didn't have time to feel guilty. About 6 weeks after our coffee shop meeting, I got a certified letter. My mother and her husband had been evicted. They were staying with the same aunt who'd called to lecture me about family. The letter was from my mother, asking one more time if I'd reconsider. She wasn't asking for money anymore, she wrote. Just help finding a job, maybe a reference, something to get them started. I read it twice and filed it away without responding. Update 2. 3 months later, I was having dinner with an old college friend when the subject of family came up. He mentioned visiting his parents over the holidays, and I found myself telling him the whole story. Expected judgment, maybe, or at least some awkward silence. Instead, he told me about his sister. She'd been in an abusive relationship for years, kept going back despite everyone's advice, and the family had finally done an intervention. They'd told her they loved her but couldn't enable the behavior anymore. No more money, no more emergency housing, no more last-minute rescues. It nearly destroyed their relationship, he said, but it was what she'd needed. She got therapy, got out, rebuilt her life. The point, he said, was that sometimes loving someone means not saving them from the consequences of their choices. That conversation shifted something in me. The guilt didn't disappear completely. I don't think it ever will, but it became manageable. I stopped seeing my decision as punishment and started seeing it as the only healthy boundary I could draw. My mother's messages eventually stopped. The family gossip died down. Life returned to its quiet rhythm. I dated someone seriously for the first time in years, a woman I'd met through work who understood boundaries, because she'd had to learn them the hard way too. We moved slowly, carefully, building something stable. About a year after the coffee shop meeting, my therapist asked if I'd achieved closure. I thought about it and realized I had, just not in the way people usually mean. Closure wasn't about reconciliation or forgiveness or even understanding. It was about accepting that some relationships are too broken to fix, and that's okay. My mother made her choices, and I made mine, and we both have to live with them. I still think about that night in the rain sometimes. Not as often as I used to, and not with the same raw anger. Now it's more like looking at an old scar, a reminder of something that hurt badly once, but doesn't anymore. That 13-year-old kid deserved better. I can't change what happened to him, but I can make sure the adult he became doesn't repeat the cycle. Update 3. It's been 2 years now since that message. I'm 30, the consulting business is thriving, and the relationship I mentioned became an engagement 6 months ago. She knows the whole story. I told her early on because I figured she deserved to know what she was getting into. She listened without judgment and told me her own difficult family history. We understood each other in a way I hadn't experienced before. Planning the wedding brought up the mother question again. My fiancée asked carefully if I'd considered inviting her. Not because she thought I should, she was clear about that, but because she wanted to make sure I'd thought it through. I had. The answer was still no. That door had closed the day she asked for money, and I wasn't interested in opening it for appearances. Last month, though, something unexpected happened. I was at the grocery store when I saw her. Just a glimpse across the produce section, but definitely her. She looked better than she had at the coffee shop, steadier somehow. She was with her husband, comparing prices on apples, and they were laughing about something. I could have walked over. Part of me wanted to, if only to see how she'd react. But I realized I didn't need to. That chapter of my life was finished. Whatever happens to her from here isn't my responsibility, and I'm okay with that. I paid for my groceries and left through a different exit. My therapist says that's growth, being able to see her without feeling rage or guilt, just a kind of distant neutrality. Maybe she's right. Or maybe it's just that I've built a life good enough that the past can't touch it anymore. Either way, I'm sleeping fine these nights. No porches, no rain, no wondering if I matter to the person who's supposed to love me. I found people who actually do, built a family of choice, created the stability I never had growing up. The message she sent 2 years ago is still in my Facebook requests, along with her number in my blocked contacts. Sometimes I think about unblocking her, not to respond, but just to see if she's tried again. I never do, though. That version of me who needs to know what she's thinking doesn't exist anymore. I'm getting married in 4 months. The wedding's small, just close friends and the family that actually showed up when it mattered. Mrs. Patterson from high school is invited. She cried when I asked her to come. My best man is the friend who told me about his sister. The woman I'm marrying understands that some spaces in my life will always be empty, and she doesn't try to fill them with false hope. That 13-year-old kid on the porch would be proud, I think. He figured it out himself after all. Just took a while longer than one night. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with friends or family who might enjoy it too. Your support means a lot. And if you have any thoughts, questions, or story ideas, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next story.